Hey everyone. So we've been writing essays. You guys have started to get down what a topic sentence should look like, what a thesis should look like, kind of body paragraph format. So I want to take a few minutes and talk a little bit about transitions. Right, so this is a really nice way to kind of smooth out your papers. It's also a really nice way to kind of elevate your tone, right? This isn't necessarily how we talk. It's not necessarily natural for us, but we're going to practice kind of putting transitions into our essays to kind of make them more smooth. So first, I just want to kind of remind you that we want to make sure that we're transitioning between paragraphs. So when we talked about body paragraph format, I talked about how each paragraph is kind of its own unit, right? And in that unit, we have like that topic sentence, we have our support, we have the commentary of the support, and then we want to kind of close out that paragraph with a transition or summary sentence, right? So I should be able to look at the last sentence of your paragraph and be like, okay, this is a transition sentence or summary. So this indicates to the reader that one idea is completely done and we're moving on to the next one, okay? So we also want to transition within our paragraphs. We've talked a little bit about integrating quotes into your essays. So you want to make sure that you're always transitioning into a quote versus just kind of starting the sentence with a quote, right? We've talked about how I could read a quote and you could read a quote and we'll kind of interpret them differently depending on how we're analyzing something, what we're trying to prove, or even our own kind of life experience, right? So you want to start out by kind of indicating to your reader that you're transitioning into someone else's idea and maybe even kind of letting them know the way you're using that quote, right? I also want to remind you that the first time you use a source that you're not introducing in your introductory paragraph, you want to introduce the title and the author's full name, right? So for example, when we're using a primary source, like just one source throughout our entire essay, we're going to introduce the title of the source and the author in the intro and kind of give a brief summary, right? But sometimes we're going to be writing essays where you're just kind of using sources throughout, and there's different sources in each paragraph. So the first time you use those, again, you want to introduce them with the title of the source and the author's full name. And I want to remind you that we always want to refer to our authors by either their full name or just their last name, right? We're not friends with Amy Tan. We're not just going to call her Amy. We have to call her Tan or Amy Tan. You can use transition words or phrases such as like furthermore or Baldwin writes or according to many sources, right? That kind of thing. So we're also going to be, of course, using commentary after our quotes. So we want to make sure we transition into our commentary, right? So for instance, you can say things like this shows, as indicated, character analysis of blank makes clear, right? Those kinds of things. Phrases are often easier for me to utilize when transitioning, and sometimes they can make my meaning a lot more specific, and I really like that. We're working on tone, right? That's one thing that we're looking at in our writing through this class. For the first essay, we were able to use first and second person like pronouns, right? Like I and me and we and our. But we're kind of trying to write with a more academic tone, right? We're code switching, if you will, into standard American English. And with that, we want to make sure that our tone stays the same with our transitions. So you want to steer clear of just saying things like this quote indicates or this quote shows or something like that, right? We also want to use transitions when we're going from one idea into the next, right? So we know that a paragraph should be like one main idea, but there are different pieces of support throughout that, right? So we want to show that one example is done and we're moving on to the next. Right? I'd like you to look up some great transitions to use. I'm going to go over a couple in the next couple slides. But I know for me, like I like to use the same like 3 transitions throughout. And so something that I do when I'm writing my own essays is I make sure that I'm looking at a kind of list and kind of changing them up from now on. So I don't from one paragraph to another, so I don't sound like super repetitive. So Transitions aren't just there to kind of smooth out your paper. They're also there to kind of indicate what you're doing with a quote or an idea, right? So maybe you want to contrast something that you'd said before. So you can use words like although or despite, however, nevertheless, nonetheless, though. You can use these, in the middle of your sentence. You can use them at the end of your sentence, or you can use them at the beginning. If you want to go from one example to the next or really indicate like, hey, I'm throwing in an example, you can say things like, for instance, for example, specifically, to illustrate, namely, right? You can also show kind of cause and effect, right? So we have things like accordingly, consequently, hence, therefore, and thus. Therefore is one of my favorite ones. I use it all the time. I always use therefore and moreover. Those are my two favorite ones. Here we have additional support, right? So maybe you've used one example earlier on, you've included some commentary about that, and you want to move on to another piece of support. So you can say, additionally, many people believe blank. Or also, it becomes clear that blank, besides, further, furthermore, and of course, my favorite, moreover. So when you're adding transitions, I definitely suggest adding them during the revision process of your paper. So if you think about the writing process, you kind of write everything out, get your ideas out, and then you want to go through and make sure, okay, am I adhering to paragraph format? Do I have enough commentary? That kind of thing. And then you want to go through and you want to kind of include those transitions. I usually include them during this revision process because this isn't really how I talk. Right? I talk in a more conversational way, in a more casual tone. I'm not saying, therefore, furthermore. So I would definitely, if you don't speak like that or it doesn't come naturally, don't worry about writing down transition words during that first draft. Right? And again, definitely try and use some different ones throughout. I hope you took some notes, and I'll see you next time.